What's up, YouTube? Mr. Llama here, and today we're going to be talking about combat mechanics, crushing blow, deadly strike, ignore target defense, open wounds. What do all of these things do? What do I want on my characters? How should I be stacking these? Any and all of those pieces. Yeah, let's dive into it and just get started because there's a lot to explain. So the first thing that we'll talk about is crushing blow. Crushing blow does a percentage of life. And this right here is the piece that makes it so strong, so good for a character, especially something like a smiter that always hits or whatever it is. This only works with a physical attack, so you won't get crushing blow or any of these things that I'm going to talk about. None of these combat mechanics apply to spells. So if you have Frozen Orb or your Blizzard or Meteor or you have Lightning Fury or whatever things like that, all of the lightning spread, all of that stuff, you're not going to get these pieces. It's only the physical hits of weapons that are going to give you any of these mechanics. So like I say, crushing blow is similar to static field, how you might know it, but it is a little bit different. But what it does is a percent of life. So it does 1/4 of a monster's life, and basically it changes. I'm going to go ahead and put up a couple things right here for you guys. Right, so you can see 1/4 of life there, and this is melee and range. I actually want to like space these out so we can have a little bit better. Okay. And then we go here and we have melee, and here we have range. There we go. That's a little bit almost better. Perfect. 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 So you can see right here, a normal monster being hit when crushing blow procs will deal 1/4 of their total remaining life. So if they have 100% of their life, you'll deal 25%. If they have 50% of their life, you'll deal 12.5%. Okay? That is from a melee attack. From a ranged attack, it's always half. If you're now fighting against another player, the penalty is going to be 1/10 and 1/20th from a ranged attack. And if you're fighting against a champion, a unique, or a boss, it is 1/8 or 1/16 if you are, of course, fighting with a ranged character. So, once again, you might look at this and go, oh, well, 1/8, how much is that really? But when you're fighting like Uber Diablo or any of those characters or Hell Bale or whatever, and they've got so much life, being able to hit them for 1/8 of their total life that they have remaining is massive. And so if you have a high crushing blow chance and you hit, you're going to just brutalize their health pool and get them down to very low life amounts very quickly. Crushing blow is one of the strongest combat mechanics in the game, I would say. Similar to static field, how everybody says static field is OP. Well, this is very similar to that and kind of gives melee the ability to have this strength as well. And this is why a lot of melee characters end up usually being the better like uber killing characters and stuff, because they have something like this, and this is going to work all the way down. So they can just do a ton of damage. Now, things to note. Crushing blow is less effective with more players in a game. So the value of the monster health is multiplied, and that's applied to the divisor for the crushing blow. So, it could have way more life, like 4 times the amount of life due to the number of players in the game. And then your melee attack's going to do like 1/16 to a normal monster instead of 1/4, right? If it has 4 times. So that's something to note, is more players does decrease the effectiveness. But even if you're doing 1/16, whatever of the monster's health, if they've got, hundreds of thousands of life, you're still going to be doing a lot of damage. So it's still very strong even at that point. So that kind of covers crushing blow. This is a, yes, it's a percent HP for your damage, basically, right? So percent HP chance. So if you have a 100% chance for crushing blow, you will always do this amount right here of damage. That looked like I was flicking you guys off. This amount or that for range. You will always do that every single time. It's very strong. Now, that's crushing blow. The second thing I want to talk about is deadly strike, because I think a lot of people get these things confused and they're like, okay, so deadly strike has to do some sort of damage with total life and all this stuff. No. Deadly strike is just critical strike. They are the exact same thing in function, and they cannot stack either. So if you have critical strike on your Amazon and deadly strike, and one of them procs, the other one will not proc. Okay, and same with your masteries for your barbarian. You have your chance for critical strike with the masteries. If one of those hits, the other one won't. This is just a natural 20 in D&D. You do 2 times the damage, and that is it. You can't do quad damage, any of that, right? It's just double damage, plain and simple, double damage. So deadly strike, of course, is great when you're fighting a lot of monsters. And this is where you have to compare the benefits of something like crushing blow and deadly strike, right? So let's create a little hypothetical scenario here. I do 100 damage. Mob 1 has 1 million life. Mob 2 has 1,000 life. Let's go even less. 500 life. And then you have to sit there and say, okay, well, where is crushing blow better and where is deadly strike better? Well, on the top mob 1, crushing blow is always going to be better. Because if I have deadly strike, I now do 200 damage against it. And that's 200 damage out of 1 million life. That's going to be a long time to kill that mob, right? So crushing blow is going to be the best thing right there. Let's pretend they're both bosses. I'm going to do 1/8 the guy's life. So I'm going to do 125,000 damage with a single crushing blow hit on mob 1. But on mob 2, and let's pretend it's once again a unique boss, having deadly strike is actually going to be more beneficial, because doing 200 damage to mob 2 is going to be more beneficial than a crushing blow strike that's going to do 1/8 of its life. And then the next hit, of course, will do less because it's 1/8 of after, it's been taken off right there, right? And it's going to be the same thing over and over and over again. So if I only really have crushing blow for mob 2, I'm going to do less and less damage every hit, and deadly strike would be doing more damage for mob 2. So I kill mob 2 faster with 100% deadly strike. I kill mob 1 faster with 100% chance of crushing blow, right? This is why it's not always one or the other is the best thing. It depends what you're fighting most often, what your damage is, all of this stuff. And yes, crushing blow and deadly strike can stack as well. So if I have both of them, I can do both of those, right? And this is why both of these are good. And you have to just kind of, once again, you want both generally for these characters. You want some chance for crushing blow, because being able to crushing blow some monsters is going to be able to do a lot of damage. But having deadly strike is going to be able to really increase your average damage, which for monsters that don't have giant HP pools is going to be worth it more. So that is deadly strike and or critical strike. Like I say, they work the same and they will not stack right there. Now, there are some things to note. Deadly strike does not work with impale, dragon talon, dragon tail, dragon flight, any of those kicks. Sacrifice, it doesn't work with smite. Crushing blow does work with smite. Deadly strike does not. There might be another skill, but those are like the main ones. And your sources of deadly strike on all of your gear does stack, with the exception of a weapon. So if a weapon has chance for deadly strike and it does not deal the blow, it will not stack. And I believe this is also true for crushing blow. Really, weapons are localized in that capacity. If the weapon itself does not deal the blow, you will not get the chance if you're dual wielding. This is only for dual wield. Yeah, if you're dual wielding, the weapons will be localized in that capacity. If you're only using a single weapon, then you're totally fine. And if it's like Gore Riders where you have your chances on that, that will apply to all of your gear and either weapon that hits. So that's just something to note. Okay, moving forward, let's talk about ignore target defense. So I had shown you guys the calculation before, and I can bring it up right here again. Your chance to hit is going to be this, generally. And this is, once again, not for a spellcaster, but for a melee or ranged character doing some sort of physical attack. This is going to be your chance to hit calculation. Your 200% times your attack rating divided by your attack rating plus their defense rating times your level divided by your level plus their level. When you have ignore target defense, the formula changes to this. Actually, I want to have it like this. It changes to this. So it just literally removes the attack rating, defense rating piece of the calculation. Note that this doesn't work for unique monsters, hirelings, other players, any of those players. I think even champions. This calculation doesn't work. You will have the top calculation, but for any other monsters, it just completely gets rid of the attack rating, defense rating calculation for your chance to hit, which is very helpful while playing through the game, but it does not completely eliminate your chance to miss when attacking. Right? So that is going to be ignore target defense. And so it does what it says. It ignores the target's defense, but it doesn't ignore their level. And so, yes, generally having a bunch of attack rating doesn't help with that, but it is going to still help with all the champions and uniques and bosses when you have that, because it doesn't work in those. Can I crush and blow with bows? You can, but it has half of the effectiveness from a ranged. Moving on, let's talk about open wounds. I think open wounds is a confusing one for a lot of people. Open wounds is a bleed dot, essentially, on a monster. It is an 8-second damage over time that scales with the player's level. So at level 50, it'll do about 800 damage over 8 seconds. At level 90, it'll do like 2,000 damage roughly over 8 seconds. It's going to be scaling right there. What's really nice about it is, and why I like using it for like my early barbarian with malice or whatever it is you're not always going to hit monsters because of the attack rating and the character level and your chance to hit calculation, and sometimes you have to run away. But if you go up and hit a mob and you and open wounds procs on it, you can run around, and for 8 seconds it's still going to be bleeding out and taking damage, which is really nice. So it kind of increases your damage in that way. It's like a poison, essentially, right? If you want to think about it in that capacity. Ranged attacks do the same thing, but the bleed damage is divided by 2, and then that damage is divided by 4 when you're using it in PvP, just as a heads up. Now, what people also really love about open wounds and why it's really useful later on in like hell and stuff is that it prevents regeneration for those 8 seconds. So if I go and hit the Ubers who have massive life regen and open wounds procs on them, that's 8 seconds where they're not regenerating health. And so that's a big component and a big piece as well for why characters that are melee characters generally are going to be better in the Ubers is for all of the spellcasters fighting the Ubers, they have to be able to out-damage their heal, which is pretty high. I mean, it's very difficult to do. Things like Meteor and stuff can kind of do it, but it is pretty difficult to out-damage their health regen. I think if any of you guys watched, I tried that with my Blizzard Sorceress, and it just wasn't going very well. I had them stuck, but the regen was too high. But if you get open wounds, like I say, it's going to be very good at dealing that damage and preventing the regen for 8 seconds. So that's open wounds. Damage isn't really high, useful early on, but late game, it's really just used for regen prevention, which is very important for many of those. Moving forward, let's talk a little bit about life and mana steal. And once again, we have a little formula for you right here. So this right here is going to be the leech. Your physical damage times your leech percent times whatever the penalty is, and I'll show the penalties right now, times the drain effectiveness. So these are going to be your penalties. Move that up right there. So in normal, 100%. In nightmare, you get 50%, and in hell, you only get 33%. So your effectiveness for leeching is going to go down as you move through the difficulties. Additionally, total physical damage is the important piece here. So if you're running like Vengeance and you have low physical damage, but all of this whatever other damage, fire and cold or whatever stuff, or you just have a big, you have the full IK set and it's got, all the added cold, lightning, fire damage, all that stuff. None of that is leeching. It's only the actual physical damage that is going to be leeching right there. So this is just something to note about that. Life Leech and Mana Leech are extremely helpful in the game and extremely important, especially late game when you're hitting a lot more. But it's still going to be a big difficulty overall, generally kind of going through, and especially early game items that are like 20% life leech, but your physical damage is like 2 to 7. Cool, great. You get like nothing back, right? It's one of those things where it's like until your physical damage really starts to get decent, you're not really going to get much back from the leech at all. And so this is very useful, though, and this is also very useful for mercenaries. Making sure your mercenary has good life leech is usually super important, as he can sustain since he does high physical damage. And this is a fantastic way to get that back for him, right? You can leech from all minions, even skeletons and everything. Leech is not proccing on Crushing Blow. You're not getting a additional leech from all of the Crushing Blow damage that you do. I'm not sure that any mob has a drain effectiveness of 0 in the game. I'm trying to think if there's one that does, but I don't believe so. And Deadly Strike, you will get the benefit for Life Leech and Mana Leech. Skeletons do have 0? Okay, Skellies in Hell and Undead have 0. Gotcha. So they have 0 drain effectiveness. So, yeah. Because once again, it's just your physical damage right there. But there is an exception to this, and that is, of course, Life Tap, which sets the drain effectiveness to 100 and provides 50% Life Leech. So it's just insane. It absolutely is ridiculous how good it is. And this is why you see smiters and melee characters or whatever run around and they have little wands on their offhand that'll cast Life Tap. You can shop a Life Tap charges wand. And or they're running Dracules or Exile or Last Wish or whatever it is, because the chance to get Life Tap procced just makes it so your life won't go down at all, right? You just see characters and they're fighting Ubers and they're surrounded by everything, but as long as they have that Life Tap proc up, they hit and they get 50% life leech and they just get massive health back. And you're just healing hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of damage every hit, and when they hit very fast, they're basically immortal in that capacity unless they get one shot. So this is Life Tap is like the primo right there, because it works on every single mob as well, which is very, very amazing. So yeah, and smiters are not going to have normal life leech, right? I guess they would if they have this. Life Tap, I believe it's still affected by the penalty, but the drain effectiveness is not. Leech no, tap yes. Okay. Life Tap doesn't have the penalty as well? That's news to me. Wow. It's ridiculous. It's so good. It's just 50% total physical weapon damage. That's absolutely disgusting. Yeah, Life Tap is so good. I mean, I've known it's nuts, and that's even further right there. Okay, moving on. Slows target. So the way slows target work is it does every attack that's a successful attack against a monster is going to slow down their attacks and their run walk speed by whatever the percentage is for whatever the duration is. This is similar to cold damage, but it's separate and it cannot be stopped, right? So for instance, cannot be frozen will prevent any slowdown from freeze damage, right? Any cold damage, you will not freeze and get the slowdown from that in any capacity. This is not true here with things like Clay Golem, things like Decrepify, the Curse, any gloves or weapons or anything with a chance to slow. It will slow the monsters and players. And I think the cap is 50% on players and up to 85% on monsters, but it depends the monster. Now, it's important to note that there is also Holy Freeze, which people think slows from the cold damage, but Holy Freeze, the real slow is it actually is a slow. So it pulses cold damage, but it also pulses a slow that is similar to, it does both. So even if somebody has cannot be frozen, it doesn't matter. The slow effect is still going to take effect from Holy Freeze. And this is why everybody fighting Duriel goes in and goes, why am I freezing? I have cannot be frozen. Why am I frozen? And that's because it'll show as blue like you're frozen. But really that's just Holy Freeze it's as if you're decrepified or as if you've been slowed by a clay golem or anything like that. It is just a slow pulse that Holy Freeze has as well. This is not actually chilled. It is a slow. So I believe I've said it wrong in the past. Chilled is when a mob is slowed but can still move. Freeze is when it actually freezes the mob, like Glacial Spike or whatever, where the mob is completely frozen. And this is a slow, which is even separate from those two things. This is just cannot be avoided no matter what. You just are slowed, and that's just going to be the capacity, or that's just going to be what it is, right? So this is why Holy Freeze Mercenaries from Act 2 are so useful, because even against cold immune monsters, against literally any monster in the game, Holy Freeze is going to work. It's going to slow down everything, and that's going to be helpful. Now, none of these will affect cast rate, which once again is why a caster character generally tends to be a better character overall in this game. And this is simply because you are never going to be affected by these things, right? So yes, your character might run slower, and if she tries to like punch or something, she'll be slower. But if she's casting her frozen orbs or whatever it is, she will always cast, or they will always cast at the exact same speed, which, like I say, makes your casters generally just stronger there. So is Holy Freeze Merce better than Might Merce? I mean, that depends what you need. Do you want the Might aura for more damage for you and your mercenary, if you're like a physical damage character? Or do you want the Holy Freeze aura for the safety because it slows everything regardless? That's always kind of the debate, right? And lastly, let's go ahead and move on into, I want to talk a little bit about grief and why grief is so strong. And the short answer basically is that the plus damage mod on grief, that just 340 to 400 damage, adds directly to the base damage of your weapon. So then it gets modified by pretty much everything, which ends up just being really ridiculously sick damage. So for a smiter, because smiters are where you see it like the most, where it's like super OP, it's basically like having a plus 90 to Holy Shield weapon. Like that's like basically the equivalent of it, right? It's like 90 hard points in Holy Shield, because Holy Shield adds your base damage, right? And Smite, they add to your base damage. This adds to the base damage as well, and it just makes it do absolutely insane damage. So obviously there's other pieces of grief that make it super strong, but that's really the main thing right there, is you get that flat damage add. It's so strong. And like I say, for Smiters especially, it is just ridiculous. But overall, it still ends up being just like the best weapon in the game for so many characters, because it's just, yeah, flat damage is really sick. And you'll also see this flat damage on other weapons as well, like Astrian's Iron Ward and stuff. But I think it's only like plus to 80, you know, things like that. Like, it's more reasonable on some other weapons, and Grief, it just really is far out there and just insane. And so cheap as well, with only really needing a low rune. So anyways, I hope that this has been helpful. I hope that this has kind of taught you guys about some of the different combat mechanics in Diablo 2. I know that they can be a little confusing, but you know, it's important to know the differences and know when you want one versus the other. Deadly Strike versus Crushing Blow versus, you know, Ignore Target Defense, right? All these things. Yeah, the Redeemer's got flat damage, all those things. So anyways, thank you guys for being here. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Peace, YouTube.